Castrating Sheep in Montana is the 12th episode of the 4th season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by James Widdoes, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts, and it's a really good episode. There's not a lot of variety in it, but it still works really well. It starts off at breakfast time. Charlie and Jake are talking about dreams. Alan comes in and he has his ear pierced, and we find out how this came about in a little bit. Charlie referred to it as the gay ear, which I'd completely forgotten was a thing. But I'm pretty sure whenever people would say that when I was at school, they would never say it's the same ear. I'm pretty sure there's no consistency with that. It was a little blast from the past, maybe not a great blast from the past, but nevertheless, it took me back in time a little bit. Berta is then in Charlie's bed. Charlie's not in the bed at this point, and Berta has been up all night looking after the baby while Naomi goes out having multiple dates. And this is Naomi from a few episodes ago where I won't say exactly what happens in case for some reason you haven't seen that episode, but she was in an episode recently which becomes relevant. And Alan is then talking to Charlie, and he won't tell Charlie who he's dating. So Charlie names some people that Alan knows, and when he gets to Berta's daughter, doesn't name her, but just says Berta's daughter, Alan responds very strangely. That definitely says he's with Naomi. And a little while later, Alan does confide in Charlie and tells him about Naomi, and he realises that he's come to really care about Naomi and her baby. And I think Charlie comes to a really interesting conclusion here. He reveals that he thinks Alan is, in his words, a pathological rescuer. Basically, he dates people who are vulnerable. Honestly, when I put it like that, that doesn't sound great. But Alan then develops this and says that maybe subconsciously he feels that if he rescues them, they will love him in return. And I think there's something in that. That definitely seems to be the case with Alan, and I imagine for a lot of people, I think there's really some good food for thought there. Naomi then comes over with Berta. Charlie's expression when they came into the kitchen was pretty great, and Alan then comes into the room, pretends to not know Naomi, gets her name wrong on purpose, and it's beautifully shot, and we look at Berta, and all she says is, well, dip me in butter and roll me in nuts, because she could see right through this charade. And Alan told Berta, anything you want to do to her, do it to me. And that sounded aggressive. He didn't say it aggressively, more protectively. And Berta hugged him and said, welcome to the family. Can't imagine anybody was expecting that. Berta's clearly really happy about this. She wakes Alan up in the morning with breakfast in bed, and she's made all of his favourite foods, and it got a little bit intense for a moment. When Berta was asking what his plans were for the day, she could pack a picnic for Alan and Naomi, and Alan pointed out he wasn't going to see Naomi today. And Berta almost got aggressive, asking why. Why does he not want to see her? He reminded Berta that he has to go to work, and Berta is relieved and points out that Naomi never dated anybody with a job before. So I feel like kind of walking on eggshells, and that's exactly what I feel like Alan is doing in this situation. I don't think it's unreasonable to fear that at any moment Berta could completely flip and change her opinion about Alan dating her daughter. And we do have a bit of suspense of wondering what's going to happen if Alan breaks up with Naomi. How would Berta react to that? Alan is clearly worried about this as well. He talks with Charlie, and Charlie tells him that all he needs to do is wait it out. Because at some point, probably soon enough, the woman is just going to hate him. Every woman in Alan's life has just grown to dislike him, so it's going to happen for Naomi. He just needs to wait it out and the relationship will be over. And he realises that that might be the safest option. He meets Naomi for coffee, and Berta has actually invited Alan to dinner on Saturday. Not just Alan, but Charlie and Jake and Evelyn. Bringing Evelyn into it seems like quite a gamble, and I think Alan realised this and he tried to back out of the dinner date. But Naomi made a scene in the coffee shop and he basically had to agree to it. We're then in the car with everybody. Brief journey, don't spend too long in there. I've mentioned before, I'm not a huge fan of being in cars in sitcoms. A lot of sitcoms, in fact most probably at some point, will have scenes inside a car, and as long as they're not too long, I don't mind them. And this one I feel like wasn't too long at all. And then the rest of the episode pretty much plays out at Berta's, having dinner, and honestly, Evelyn was better behaved than I expected she would be. She had a couple of remarks, but in general, I thought she was on her version of her best behaviour. And it's going well enough. There is definitely an uneasiness. And then there's a knock at the door. And it's Hector, the baby's father. And Naomi is overjoyed, and she's with Hector, and Charlie tells Alan, your relationship's run its natural course. And Alan realises this is his out. And I have to say, on the one hand, yes, it does kind of feel like a bit of a cop-out, just giving Alan a reason for the relationship to be over rather than seeing what that might look like if he ended it. But at the same time, I feel like if they were going to wrap this up in one episode, as they've done, that is probably the best way to do it. So I don't think that's too bad at all. They could have dragged it out a bit longer. I just would have liked to have seen Berta's reaction if Alan tried to break up with Naomi. But what we got, I think, still worked really well. It's a well-written narrative and some really nice suspense here as well. And ultimately, not too bad. I don't think it's ever going to be an all-time favourite episode. But that being said, there isn't really anything about castrating sheep in Montana that I didn't like. Definitely not a bad episode of 2.5 Men.